Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled "Snob Neighbor Tore Up My Driveway, I Made His Property Uninhabitable. Never Mess with a Farmer." My grandparents had migrated to the USA from Europe and bought their first house together. The house was a traditional farmhouse on a huge plot of land. In order to visit the neighbors, it would make more sense to drive over there. A couple of years ago, both of my grandparents passed away in the same year. My parents were able to inherit the entire property, including the land that it sat on. However, this was a lot of land for my parents, so they decided to sell the farmhouse but keep the property that it sat on. They were able to divide up the property, and with the revenue they got from selling the farmhouse, rezone and build another house on the property that they had decided to live in. In another zone of land, my parents built a house for my aunt and her husband. They were all on the same plot of land, but owned their own houses. The original house did need some work, so when a local construction worker bought it, my mom and sister were happy their parents' house would still retain its beauty. It was an ideal situation for everyone involved. Until it was not. We will call the guy who bought the original house Daniel, we will call my aunt and her husband Jack and Diane, and we will call my parents William and Bertha. Daniel was not local to the country. I mean, he worked out in the country and farmlands, but he had an expensive apartment in the city. My parents were not too aware of the type of person he was, but he was not liked by the town locals and was known to be entitled and arrogant. He did not come off this way when my parents had met him, but that was to entice them to sell him the house. Here is where things get interesting. Daniel decides that he wants to do major renovations to the house. These renovations required contractors and work trucks out at the house every single day. My parents, Jack and Diane, had no problems with this except one. The contractor kept parking their work trucks on Jack and Diane's property. Now, with the way the properties were built on the land, it was more efficient for these workers to park their trucks closer to Diane's property line. However, they were not warned that these trucks would be parking here, and the trucks were loaded with equipment and were pretty bulky. My aunt was afraid it would tear up the grass and whatnot. If Daniel would have come over and asked politely if they could park their trucks near their house, I'm sure they could have worked something out and not parked on the grass. However, they were starting to find out that Daniel was very rude and entitled. A couple of days after the work started, Jack was outside when the construction workers pulled up and had approached them. He had politely asked them if they could not park on the grass because it was going to tear up the ground and plant/grass around it. Jack even offered for them to park on a concrete slab they had behind their garage. However, day after day, they still kept parking on the grass. Well, Jack had enough. He knew how important this land was to his wife and my mom, so he decided to build a fence around the area and create a yard. It was not a complicated fence by any means, and the great thing about being from the country and working on farms was that he had all the equipment to do it himself. So that is what he did. He put some stakes in the ground and strung planks between them. Well, of course, this caused mayhem for the construction workers. They had a longer walk to the original house, and since there were multiple workers, plumbers, general contractors, etc., sometimes they would have to wait for each other to finish before they could pull up and start their own work. This seemed to be putting delays in their work, but this was something Daniel should have thought about beforehand. And in just a matter of 2 days, Daniel came running over to Jack and Diane's house demanding that they take down the fence. Jack had told Daniel to go to hell and that they could not tell them what to do on their property. If they wanted to park outside the fence, they could. This answer must have enraged Daniel even more, because the next day Jack had woken up and seen that parts of his fence were missing. Not the whole fence, which seemed weird at first, but realized that certain sections of the fence were taken out so the trucks could back in. We all knew it had to be Daniel. Well, Jack was not one to put up with BS, so he decided to irrigate the area. There was a well on the property, but it had limited capacity, so Jack had to call in the water company. Luckily, he knew some people there. He also knew every tow truck driver within 80 miles, and that was going to suck for Daniel's contractors, because they were going to need one when they drove through all the mud and got stuck. Let us fast forward a couple of months though. Daniel's house is complete except the swimming pool that was installed. It just needed to be filled with water, and Daniel thought it was a good idea to use the well on the land in order to fill it. Keep in mind that the well is on Jack and Diane's property. Well, because the well only carries a certain amount of water, this caused major problems. The well was sucked dry and sand and dirt was starting to pour into the well. When Jack and Diane told Daniel the damage he had caused to the well, Daniel responded that it was their fault since the well was on their property. They were absolutely livid. Jack was even trying to be nice and offered to split the cost of repairing it, but Daniel wanted to part in paying out his own cash. Well, a year or two later, Daniel announced he was selling the house. And that is when Jack saw an opportunity. He cut the well water supply leading to Daniel's house, as well as kept the septic line that led to the house. You could not sell a house with no water, right? Well, of course, this enraged Daniel once he found out his property line itself was pretty awkward and small, so he could not build or install a proper septic tank unless he removed the pool. This would obviously cost a lot of money and waste the thousands he spent on renovations. Well, Daniel decided to take Jack and Diane to court for this. He said that he was entitled to the well and septic line just as much as the other houses on the land. Unfortunately for Daniel, his case was almost immediately dismissed because it was concluded between splitting up the property and my grandparents' will that technically no house other than Jack and Diane's were entitled to these things. My parents' house had access to these things, by the way. So that house sat vacant for months. No one wanted to buy a house that had not built-in water access or waste removal. I could not blame them. I would not want to either. Many people tried to negotiate with Jack and Diane about restoring service, but they all declined. Until a small farming corporation came in and offered to buy the house for a quarter of what the asking price was. At this point, Daniel had no choice but to accept, as it had been on the market for so long. And to rub it in even further, Jack and Diane negotiated the usage of the well water and septic line with the corporation, which pissed Daniel off to no end. This ended up jacking up the value of the price, so if the corporation decides to sell the property, they will be filling their bank accounts and more. Moral of the story, Daniel: if you treat people like crap, prepare to deal with the same. And guys, if you have watched until here and enjoy the stories about neighbors messing with other neighbors' property, then please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. Your help is very much appreciated. The next one is titled "Inconsiderate Neighbors Think I Will Shovel Their Snow." I share a driveway with a very stupid neighbor who sometimes blocks my garage and it pisses me off, so we got our first snowstorm today, and since I have a 3-car garage and they have none, I got space to put extra stuff like a snowblower and my motorcycles, tools and whatnot. It is a huge driveway, so since I got the snow blower, they thought I was going to remove snow blocking their vehicles. I had some homework due today since class was cancelled, and I finished it up and went out to remove the snow. Also in my mind, my car is lowered and I have summer tires, so the plan was to remove the summer tires, raise my car and install my winter tires in a snowstorm. Bad idea, but I couldn't do it earlier because my weekend got ruined. So then I get out and I see my neighbor shoveling snow out of their car, but they are only removing snow from their cars and not around it. Put in mind, there is about a foot or more of snow on the ground. I removed the snowblower, and about 15 minutes after I took it out, the neighbors went inside to be cozy and warm, without shoveling their cars, assuming that my big bad MF snowblower would save their day. Oh, they were wrong. I start moving the BS snow with the snowblower and it works like a charm. This MF is huge, I think 32 inches, 14 horsepower, eating that BS up, pulling me around like I'm a cartoon figure. I move snow to the furthest right because their cars are to the left. I keep that beast moving, gobbling up the snow, and soon enough another one of the neighbors comes in and this guy is waiting for me to plow so he can move in his car. I looked at him, laughed and turned off the snowblower because I had to shovel snow by hand now because the snowblower doesn't get everything. Once the neighbor saw that, he parked his car on the street and got a shovel to try to act like he was going to shovel, but I was not born last week, so I ignored him because I knew he wanted me to either shovel his side or give him the snowblower. He eventually left his car on the street and joined the gang in being warm and cozy, thinking Big Papa over here will handle their responsibilities. Well, eventually I managed to remove all the snow that would help get my vehicles out, moving all that snow to my property and avoiding to touch their side at all. I did a bulk of the work that made their shoveling easier, but they would still need to shovel to get their cars out, and I know they are all FWD cars with crappy tires. They won't go anywhere without shoveling. So I finished shoveling and raising my car and switching the tires by 6:30 PM after starting at 1 PM. No rest, no time to warm up or anything. Just straight suffering, but I was done. I was hungry and went to wash up and ordered a pizza because I was so hungry I could eat a horse if it ran by in the snowstorm. I went upstairs after putting everything away, and when it was time to get my pizza because I could not wait 1 hour for delivery, I now see my neighbors with their terrible shovels removing snow. It's not very dark and they look at me like animals looking to get adopted in a shelter while I drove by with my winter tires, driveway clean, and I am hungry as hell. I picked up my pizza and reversed in, something I wouldn't have been able to do without my winter tires, and I see them trying to trigger my solar lights so they can see me because they are too cheap to turn on their lights. I get my pizza and go stuff my face, and now I hear them shoveling 3 hours after I was done, and now I am warm and cozy while they are suffering and will be suffering for a few more hours while I watch TV. The next one is titled Getting Back at Crappy Neighbors. About a year ago, my family and I moved into a new house. The side of our backyard is butted up to the back of 2 other yards. At one home there is a sweet young family and their dog. At the other there are 6 children under the age of 10 who seem to lack any resemblance of decency. I have 2 dogs, mastiffs. They are sweethearts, but their size can make them intimidating, so we have a tall privacy fence. A fence not designed to be climbed over. Well, this does nothing to stop a-hole neighbor kids who hit things into our yard, climb the fence and exit through the gate, leaving it wide open for our dogs to run away instead of coming to the door and politely asking for help. I had to install padlocks on the gates so they could not attempt the stunt anymore. Beyond that, in their own yard they constantly come to the fence and bang on it and make noises to annoy my dogs, even spraying the hose through it to my surprise when I let in 2 soaking wet pups. So I did what any rational person would do. I decided the best time to wash my fence would be when they were outside right next to it. They broke a hole in it, hitting things at it, so I aimed right through and nailed each child with a stream of freezing cold hose water. Simple, but I sure felt good about it. The next one is titled, My neighbor takes up a lot of space in our shared driveway, so do I. So the house I own shares a split garage and a driveway with the house next to me. My house is brown, theirs is white, and while I was looking for a house, the white house went up for sale before the brown house. I looked at both, so when I first got to the brown house, I knew the setup. The garage has 2 single car doors and a dividing wall that goes down the middle of it. Neither of us park in the garage as the cement is uneven. Our driveway is in a bit of a Y shape where only 1 car can get out or in at a time, but if you are up by the driveway you can fit 2 cars comfortably side by side. The problem is that my neighbors park far enough down the driveway that it makes backing in a huge pain. They have done this since the start. They moved into the white house a few months before I moved into the brown one. I guess they got a little too comfortable having the whole driveway to themselves, because even a year later they still cannot figure out how to properly park. They have hit their fence post at least 3 times backing in, all while I was not there. Because they make it a hassle for me to get into my half of our driveway, I have began parking next to them. Does not seem like a problem, right? Wrong. It makes it a huge pain for them to get out of the driveway. I have the option of driving into my yard as it is flat, but damn it, I wanna keep my yard nice. They, however, have raised stones lining their side. The further down they park, the further I park. The further I park, the closer they get to scraping against those stones. Why don't we both drive into the driveway instead of backing in, you may ask? Because the neighbor across the street sometimes parks across from our driveway, and it makes it very difficult to get out even with a backup camera. Neither of us have said a word about this to the other, but I know that they know what I'm doing. Every time I park next to them, they back all the way into their side for a few days, and then it is back to the same crap. I'm just so sick of this song and dance. As long as they refuse to park in a way that is not fair to me, I will continue to be petty. Hell, maybe I will even start parking further down than they do, just to really get the point across. And the next one is titled, "Be an a-hole of a neighbor, I will ruin your day." So this was a while back, but I thought it was worthwhile to share. So about 8 months ago, we had a new neighbor move into an apartment across the way from us. Let's call her B for BITCH. We have a sidewalk right in front of our main door, which we have been parked in front of for over 4 years without a single problem. For some reason, B was not happy that we parked there. Mind you that up to 3 cars can park there happily. What she began doing was that she'd park directly in the middle so that no one could park in the front. Front of the car would be in the street or the back, too close to a fire lane. We put up with it for a while until June, when I broke my leg. I was in a cast and crutches, so it was a pain to get in my house. B would park right in the middle like usual, making us park 150 feet away from my house rather than 3. B then also had the nerve to tow our car when we parked too close to the fire lane. This was the last straw. It was perfect timing, as I was going to have a few buddies pick me up and take me out for the 4th of July. I told them what was up and we devised a plan. They all had big trucks, so we waited for B to get home on July 3rd. I had a buddy park one of the trucks behind her, one on the left side of her and one in front of her, so there would be no way she could make it out. I ordered an Uber for us and we had one hell of a 4th of July. I came home to be furious, stating that her child was crying all day and that I ruined her 4th of July. Best day ever. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.